Good evening, guys. Today we are going to discuss another very important topic on changing dimension of state, welfare, regulatory, and coercive. So this is another important changing nature of Indian state that we'll discuss briefly in this particular video lecture. So we'll be discussing the changing nature of Indian state, welfare, nature or welfare dimension, and then regulatory dimension, and then coercive dimension. We'll try to understand the concepts, and then we'll move on to discuss the changing nature of or changing dimension of welfare state in India, and then regulatory state and coercive state. Uh, and we'll understand this through certain important conceptual discussion. So, first of all, what is welfare dimension or welfare, you know, nature of a state? So, the welfare state refers to a government that assumes responsibility for the well-being of its citizens by providing social services such as healthcare, education, and social security. Its objectives are also about reducing economic inequalities, reducing poverty or elevation of poverty and hunger, etc. So the welfare nature of this state is basically about having extensive redistributive activities or policies, be it through health, education, employment, etc., or even housing or income support or support in terms of social welfare or social security. And this sort of activities actually give rise to higher taxation. This an important you know uh, feature of a welfare state. Coming to the welfare dimension of the state. So the welfare dimension of the state is this: that the welfare state refers to a government that assumes the responsibility for well-being of the citizen by providing social services such as healthcare, education, and social security, etc. In terms of global perspective, European countries and mainly the Nordic nations actually have established a very comprehensive welfare systems that offer extensive social benefits to their population. So for example, public transport and an education is highly subsidized or free in many of these countries. In Indian context, the welfare nature actually began in the early independence period only. In the post-independence uh, era only, the welfare initiatives were introduced by the government of India. Why it were introduced? Because India inherited a colonial legacy. A large number of people were below poverty line. There were landlessness, there was hunger everywhere. There were stagnation in the economic growth, or industrial development was almost negligent in India in the post-independence India. So India adopted a mixed economy model, emphasizing state-led development or statist kind of economy, where the state actually played a dominant role in guiding the economy, and the welfare initiatives to address poverty and inequality in India. And for this reason, government had to introduce 5-year plans, such as uh, you know 5-year plans started in the 1950s itself. So 5-year plans actually prioritized social sector spending and and aiming to improve healthcare, education, and employment opportunities, etc. And also in recent years, if you look into the government of India's welfare initiatives, this is a very important initiatives. One of the very important initiatives of the government of India, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It was launched in 2005, which is known as Narega. Later on, it was amended and is known as Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, which provides at least 100 days of wage employment annually to rural household, enhancing livelihood security, because a large number of people were moving to the urban areas for employment opportunities. So this was a major you know public spending or public work program, which is open to all who is willing to do manual labor. The fourth one is, of course, which started in the interwar period in the 1960s itself. So this is known as public distribution system. So PDS is a very important public welfare schemes of the government of India. So this altogether, makes the Indian state a welfare state. These, constitute the welfare nature of Indian state. So India's PDS supplies, are basically subsidized, food grain to the poor, aiming to ensure food security to vulnerable populations. So this is a major scheme of the government of India. Despite welfare schemes, uh, you know, issues like bureaucratic inefficiency is a major challenge. For a long time, India was a welfare state. Of course, government of India was spending lots of resources in the welfare of the people of India in the social sector, and primarily because of this, many economists were very critical about it. The liberal economists were very critical about it. They were saying that it is preventing public investment, and it is creating hurdles for the government for creating infrastructure or building infrastructure, because large sum of resources of the government is actually being pumped into the social sector. So and the major problem is this, that even though we are spending a large quantity, a huge portion of our resources in social sector, there were bureaucratic inefficiencies, corruption, and also a systematic siphoning of the funds meant for the poor people. So unequal access also hindered effective uh, service delivery. So this is a major challenge. But in recent years, the economic globalization in particular, because globalization is not merely about economic globalization, right? Globalization is also about cultural globalization or political globalization. But we are talking about economic globalization, uh, which has actually led some countries to actually reassess welfare policies, right? Balancing social support with economic competitiveness, and integration of data analytics into welfare state, aiming to enhance service delivery, uh, but raises concerns about privacy and surveillance. It's a different question altogether. But these days we are very concerned about the wastage of resources and diversion of resources meant for the poor people. The intended beneficiaries should get the state support, state services. So another issue is emerging globally, is this, that globally nations are actually aligning welfare policies with sustainable development goals to eradicate poverty and ensure inclusive, development, uh, etc. So, this is about the welfare nature of a state. Now, coming to regulatory dimension of a state, uh, as we know that after the introduction of the liberalizing policy or liberalization in India in the 1990s, many things have changed, and states, uh, you know, regulatory states are basically, you know, uh, no, regulatory state actually refers to what? It basically refers to state oversight of public and private services provisions and behavior, like food safety or workplace safety, etc., which we'll discuss in a while. So, uh, a regulatory state, a state which actually regulates rather than owns, right? So, the state not owning certain things, but it regulates through various mechanisms, right? So, regulatory role of the state involves, for example, establishing and enforcing laws and standards to maintain order, protect rights, and ensure a fair market. So, regulatory institutions actually developed in India, emerged in India in the 90s, right? Then, for example, you have regulatory frameworks are different from country to country. So globally it differs. So regulatory frameworks actually vary worldwide, with some nations favoring free market, right? Favoring free market and minimal state intervention, while others implement stringent regulations to control economic activities, right? So most of the countries uh, are globally are moving or are neoliberal economies. They support free market and minimal state intervention in the economy, uh, in economic activities, or in economy, broadly speaking, in economy. So while other implement stringent regulations, some states actually implement stringent regulation to control economic activities. So in India we have many regulatory institutions, and they together constitute regulatory nature of Indian state, which we'll discuss in a while. In Indian context, for example, there are many institutions, so regulatory bodies are there. We created these after the liberalization in particular. So, for example, in Indian context, for example, you see regulatory bodies. India's regulatory landscape includes bodies like the SEBI, for example, Security and Exchange Board of India, and Reserve Bank is also one of them to regulate the banking sector, and to oversee financial and monetary policy, etc. So this is basically in the financial sector. Uh, so India's economic reform of 1991 is a major break in terms of uh, welfare nature of the state. It is a state. It is right from 1990s. It is said that the state actually withdrew from the welfare responsibilities, right? So uh, it withdrew from the welfare responsibility. Whether it is so or not, that we'll discuss in a while. But certainly, the welfare standing, the welfare spending, actually, the spending on the social sector actually declined a lot because government, withdrew, supporting certain sector. For example, subsidies were actually caught in very many sectors of Indian economy. So India's liberalization actually reduced state control over the economy, right? Earlier, it was a state-led economy, but the reform initiative actually began in India in the 1980s itself, and the government of India actually reduced, state control over the economy and promoting, private enterprise or private initiatives or private participation in the economy, right? So retaining, so this gave rise to, regulatory nature of the state, right? It gave rise to regulatory oversight to ensure that there should be fair competition in the market or in the economy. Therefore you have competition commission of India जैसे कई तरीके के इस तरह के संगठन बनाई गई है. जैसे एनवायरमेंटल सेक्टर में एनवायरमेंटल रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज बनाए गए हैं. ठीक है, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया enforces what environmental laws also to mitigate pollution, promote sustainable development through enforcement. Challenges, though enforcement challenges persist, right? Similarly, you have digital regulation. We are getting digitized, and we live in a digital society, or digitized society, and digitization is rapidly growing. So government of India has created such institutions to sort of regulate this sector also. So with the rise of the digital economy, India has introduced regulations like Information Technology Act, etc., to govern cyberspace activities, right? Then you have you know uh, you know regulatory trends. If you look into regulatory trends globally and in Indian context, uh, in global context, global regulatory trends. Internationally, there is a growing emphasis on regulating multinational corporations to prevent what tax evasion and ensure corporate responsibilities, etc. Right? So these multinational corporations are very very powerful. Their business spreads across so many nations. So they are so powerful and they evade taxation also. For example, in Indian context, the Indian government also not able to tax, for example, Twitter or X or Facebook or even Amazon, right? They are so powerful. Regulatory challenges in India, for example, complex regulation, bureaucratic red tape is there, and these impede business operation, also sometimes leading to call for regulatory simplification. If you rigidly regulate such activities, business and enterprises, then they would find it hard to actually function or operate in India. So the another issue is about consumer protection, that today we live in a capitalist or in other word call it capitalist or globalized world, where market is very very important. Market play a very dominant role. It is not the state. Now the market decides the the price or or so many things of commodities that we buy from the market. So the consumer should be protected, right? The state should ensure that the consumer should not be cheated, right? So therefore, and also the consumer should get right product for for the price they pay, right? The money they pay so for it. So India consumer protection act actually aims to protect this regulatory law aims to safeguard consumer rights, right? Reflecting the state's commitment to regulatory oversight in the market transaction also. So this is how it controls market, right? So the global financial regulations are also there in the post 2008 financial crisis. There has been a global push for stronger financial regulations to prevent economic instability. In 2008, it is said that the main reason as to why the global economic you know downturn happened is because of the lack of strong regulatory mechanisms, or they were not strong, they were not regulated properly, or the states actually could not regulate them. The other dimension is coercive dimension. This is a very contested dimension of the state globally, not just in Indian context. The coercive nature of the state is often criticized by many scholars. Many people are critical about it, right? So, what is this coercive nature means, right? So, coercive nature is basically, uh, it intended to uh, you know uh, for example, coercive measures are actually initiated, right, uh, to intended to force people to do something that they do not want to do, right? So coercive measures would include, for example, use of force, or legal frameworks, strong law, extraordinary laws, etc., or even sometimes some sort of regulatory measures or surveillance mechanisms, right? And the government, or the may use state power and control, or even enforcement or security apparatus, right? And also deployment of certain coercive instruments for compliance, or also uh, you know maintain maintain, right, public order, and address challenges of say social unrest, or insurgency, or corruption, etc. So this is basically called coercive nature of the state. So coercive aspect of the state pertains to monopoly on the legitimate use of force. ये साधारणतः बल के प्रयोग के संदर्भ में बात की जाती है, जब राज्य शक्ति का प्रयोग करता है लॉ एंड ऑर्डर को मेंटेन करने के लिए, तभी या फिर सॉवरेनिटी को, या संप्रभुता को, और या लॉ को, कानून को लागू करने के लिए अगर ये वैधिक वैध तरीके से शक्ति का प्रयोग करता है, तो इस प्रकार के जो एक पर्सपेक्टिव होते हैं राज्य का, तो फिर इससे हम क्या कहते हैं, एक कोएर्सिव स्टेट कहते हैं, राइट? सो द कोएर्सिव एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द स्टेट pertains to its monopoly on the legitimate use of force to maintain law and order, defend sovereignty, and implement law. Globally, also, many states are acquiring, particularly in the post-COVID scenario, are acquiring, coercive nature, right? So, states employ what? Coercive power through institutions like police, military, or some, enforcement agencies, or etc., to enforce law or protect, national interest of some sorts. And it is here that these sort of powers can be, or possibly, uh, uh, used by the government for private or political interest, right? For example, in Indian context, military and law enforcement, India maintains about, its robust military and law enforcement apparatus to address internal and external, security challenges. Internal security, in terms of internal security, India faces internal security issues including insurgencies or communal tensions, necessitating a coercive state response to maintain order. Similarly, Indian Constitution has a provision for which is known as emergency provision, uh, and these provisions are declared uh, in case of certain crisis, right? So state emergency can be used in exceptional cases, uh, when there is a armed rebellion or external aggression. This provision can be used by the government of India. So this actually leads to the question of human rights violation and civil rights, the violation of civil rights. So excessive use of coercive power can lead to human rights violations, promoting debates on the balance between security and civil liberties, etc. So the global perspective is also is this, that there is a privatization concern. The rise of private security firms globally has led to debate about states' monopoly of coercive power and accountability issues. Similarly, coercion in policy implementation is a major concern in democratic societies, and there is a great deal of debate about democratic authoritarianism in the contemporary political science literature. So certain policies such as I'm just giving one example: population control measures. This may not be an appropriate example. Can involve some coercive tactics, etc., which may actually give rise to certain ethical and effectiveness concerns. So this is one point. And balancing coercion and welfare, the modern state actually strives to balance its coercive functions with welfare responsibilities, ensuring security while promoting citizens well-being. So this is a debate that how a coercive state should maintain balance in ensuring security and at the same time promoting citizens well-being, etc. Now, specifically coming to the changing dimensions of of welfare state in India, how welfare state is changing or whatever in the post-independent period, as we have already discussed. Following India's independence in 1947, India actually adopted a welfare, you know, or a socialist, inspired approach, emphasizing state-led development and the establishment of welfare schemes to address poverty and inequality. Directive principle of state policy in Indian Constitution also actually mandates that the state should promote the welfare of the people by securing a social order in which social, economic, and political shall inform. I mean, the social, economic, and political justice shall inform all institutions of national life. Similarly, we have discussed that PDS is one of the important, part of Indian welfare system, uh, which began in the World War, II scenario or interwar period in the 1960s. Uh, but in Indian case, this began in the during the Second World War. Uh, uh, so PDS is still ongoing, even though there are questions of efficiency, and there are questions of bureaucratic corruption, etc., in the PDS. But it is a lifeline for a large chunk of Indian population who live below poverty line in the rural areas and urban areas. This PDS expanded the welfare provision, particularly the public distribution system actually expanded manifold with the success of green revolution in India in the 1960s. So increased agricultural productivity due to the success of Green Revolution actually helped the government to expand welfare programs like PDS in the rural region, and and to address the challenges of food security and supporting farmers, etc. Farmers, etc. Right? And this is a very important issue, and this success actually led to a positive impact in very, many areas of Indian polity. The government of India became confident that now the government is actually able to feed its population, right? It need not have to uh, sort of import food grains as such. So this is a major success for the government of India, and this led to the expansion of the welfare you know schemes like the public distribution system in India. But when the liberalization started, economic reform started in 1991, things started to uh, you know uh, challenge the welfare nature of Indian state. The liberalization of Indian economy reduced state control, leading to a shift from universal welfare schemes to targeted interventions, right? Uh, Targeted PDS, right? Targeted public distribution system actually started. That at one time the government was trying for a universal sort of welfare schemes. Now it said that we should actually introduce targeted PDS or TPDS, or targeted public distribution system, aimed at the most vulnerable segment of Indian population. Today we have, even though we criticized, even though Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee suffers from crunch of funds and all, and also there is a need to support such schemes. If there is no political will to support, then such welfare schemes will not become successful. But let me tell you that India could actually manage you know uh, COVID impact, the impact of COVID, primarily because of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. The government of India started spending through the MG Narega, because a large number of working population laborers actually went back to their villages, and they started starving. So government immediately started many schemes, uh, uh, and to and successfully checked the problem of this hunger and poverty, particularly the employment opportunities. I mean, it guaranteed at least that the people should get some sort of employment in their own villages. Then government of India started this scheme called Right to Education in 2009. Then because of lots of problems, particularly corruption, government decided for a DBT, or direct benefit transfer. So now the possibility of corruption is very less, because the beneficiaries actually directly get their benefits from the government through cash transfer. So the introduction of Aadhaar unique identification system facilitated direct benefit transfer, and and reducing leakage in the welfare schemes, ensuring subsidies reach intended beneficiaries, right? So another scheme is very very important, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. In 2014 government introduced, and 400 million in unbanked individuals actually were provided with bank accounts, enabling direct transfer of benefits from the government. Another scheme called Ayushman Bharat scheme, introduced in 2018, is a health insurance scheme seeks to provide coverage to over 100 million poor and vulnerable families, is another significant step towards universal health coverage in India in post-COVID scenario. During the COVID also, the government actually shoulder all sort of responsibilities, right? The government cannot leave people to fend for themselves. So this shows the belligerent welfare nature of Indian state, even though to a great extent we have privatized our economy, we have liberalized our economy, and the market dominates, market plays a dominant role in India today. But during the pandemics, the government announced relief measures of many sort, including free food grains under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, benefiting about 800 million people. This sort of uh, you know because we already have an infrastructure, you know etc., to sort of uh, provide benefits to the people. So there is a need to integrate technology in the process, and government has started integrating technology in the welfare distribution of welfare schemes. And there are also decentralization efforts, because we have local level democratic institutions, and there has been a push towards empowering local government, that is panchayat raj institutions, to implement welfare schemes, promoting localized decision making and accountability, etc. Then you have, of course, there are challenges of exclusion. We can't say that there are no problem and everything is right in our welfare delivery system. Despite significant advancements, exclusion errors actually persist, with studies indicating that up to 70% eligible beneficiaries may be left out of the social protection program. But this is very exaggerated kind of figure. So now, what about regulatory nature? What is regulatory nature? The regulatory nature of the state refers to its role in establishing and enforcing rules and standards to guide economic and social activities, ensure fairness, safety, and protection of public interest. So this is what is called regulatory nature of the state. So government, states establishes certain rules and standards and certain regulatory institutions to ensure that such autonomous, or in other words, such institutions are actually regulated to protect public interest, and to ensure fairness and safety, etc. So how it actually uh, you know uh, regulates? It regulates through market oversight. It regulates health sector also, public health and safety issues. For financial issues also, there is a financial supervision, there are labor standards, there are environmental protections, there are consumer protections, there are telecommunication and media regulations, there are energy regulations, etc., right? So these are key aspects of the or key aspects of the regulatory nature of Indian states. For example, you have to regulate telecommunication, then you have to regulate energy sector, electricity sector, then you have to protect consumers. So you have many regulating product safety, advertising, and fairness trade practices, etc., there. So financial institutions should also need monitoring, right, and maintain stability to prevent systemic risks, etc., right? So regulatory state in India, for example, establishment of independent regulatory authorities. Since economic liberalization in 1991, India has established several independent regulatory bodies to oversee various sectors, ensuring fair practices to and to prevent monopolies. Similarly, you have insurance sector. You have insurance sector. You have in 1999 you had IRDAI, Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India. It is a regulatory body. Similarly, you have goods and services tax implementation. Then you have insolvency or bankruptcy code, etc. You have TRI, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. These are all RBI. Then you have SEBI, Security Exchange Board of India, 1992, established in 1992. You have Food Safety and Standard Authority of India. These are all regulatory institutions through which the state, Indian state, regulates the activities of these sectors. Now, coming to the coercive nature of state, it refers to its capacity to enforce law, right, maintain order, compel compliance through use of force or threat of force. So this is what we call what call we call coercive nature of the state. So it is about uh, legitimately using force in a sense to get compliance from people through by using force or legal framework or regulatory measures or even surveillance mechanism, etc. So government can use lots of state power, to implement things or to get things done. So for example, the key aspect of regulatory nature of the state is this are these: monopoly on legitimate use of force. The state holds the exclusive right to use or authorize the use of physical force within its territory, distinguishing it from other entities. Then law enforcement, through police and judicial systems, the state enforces laws, differing and punishing unlawful behavior. Then you have military power. The state maintains armed forces to defend against external threat and in some cases to suppress internal dissent. You have taxation authorities. The state imposes taxes, compelling citizens and businesses to contribute to public finances under threat of legal penalties. Similarly, you have regulatory enforcement. The state enforces regulations across various sectors such as environmental laws, labor standards, financial regulations, using sanction for not compliance or non-compliance. Then you have control over public assemblies. The state regulates and when necessary restricts public gatherings to maintain law and order. Then you have a very contested coercive nature of the state is the surveillance, right? Surveillance and intelligence gathering. The state conducts surveillance to monitor and prevent activities deemed harmful to national security and public order. And another aspect is emergency power. In times of crisis, the state may invoke, but this is a exceptional case. Uh, it may invoke emergency power, for allowing for suspension of certain rights and use of you know coercive measures to restore uh, you know order in the country. So the coercive nature of the state in India is about use of preventive detention law, deployment of armed forces in internal conflict, use of force against dissent. Then you have surveillance and data gathering. Then you have regulation of civil society organizations. You have control over media or use of sedition laws, etc., or regulation of public assemblies. These are the coercive nature of state in India. uh, if at all it is a sort of a coercive state. But I don't see that in today's world any state is purely authoritarian state or a coercive state. We don't see a pure, coercive state. We don't see a pure, capitalist state or pure socialist state. So therefore, you know, globally, the nature of the state vary a lot, right? So this is about the changing nature of the Indian state, particularly the welfare nature or welfare dimension. Then you have regulatory dimension and coercive dimensions of the state. uh, uh, I think we have discussed enough. If there are any queries, you can ask me. We can discuss it further in future. Thank you very much. I stop here.